Hi, I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Hello again, nice to see you all. I believe last time we caught up it was about 12 months ago for the album of the year 2021. Time really does fly. I'm not even sure how many people will actually see this video. You know, the YouTube algorithm is unforgivable to content creators who don't make anything for about a year. So, you know, if you are here and you have managed to navigate to this video, that's great. Thank you for being here. You know, I've been doing Deep Cuts for 6 years and it's really cool that there are still people who want to hear about my opinion of music. So thanks for being here. It's great. I would also say if you do want to keep up with my opinions on music, what I'm up to on a fairly regular basis, certainly more regular than once every 12 months anyway, do follow me on Instagram at Oliver J. Kemp. I regularly put up stories about what sort of music I'm listening to, recommending bits and bobs. Some of you follow me on Twitter, but I spend very little time in that cesspit anymore. So do follow me there if you want to keep up with things and you know, announcements about new videos or whatever. So 2022, pretty stacked year in terms of releases. I think I say that every year, but this year, above all others, I really struggled to come up with my top 20 list. And that's because I think the caliber, the quality is so high this year. I just thought there's so many records I want to talk about, but I can't talk about because I really don't have hours to do this video. I only need to talk about 20 really. So I am just going to list off a load of records I think deserve a bit of attention. Soul Glow's Diaspora Problems, Two Ribbons by Let's Eat Grandma, Black Midi's Hellfire, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar, Rival Consoles with Now Is, Richard Dawson's Ruby Chord, Chimera 1 by Colin Stetson, Cometa by Nick Hakim, Cheat Codes by Danger Mouse and Black Thought, The Loneliest Time by Carly Rae Jepsen, Shy Girl with Nymph, Decide by Joe, The Comet Is Coming with Hyperdimensional Expansion Beam, Whatever the Weather's self-titled, Björk's Fossora, Natural Brown Prom Queen by Sudan Archives, Perfume Genius with Ugly Season, Ways Blood with And in the Darkness Hearts Aglow, Ithaca's They Fear Us, Skinty Fear by Fontaines DC, and Angel in Real Time by Gang of Youths. I'm sure there are more than a couple of records in that list that you think should be in the top 20. I want you to argue with me, slag me off, do it in the comments section. It's been a year, so we might as well make the most of it and have a bit of fun. Number 20, They Are Gutting a Body of Water, Lucky Styles. Do you like the sound of a Gen Z My Bloody Valentine? No, fair enough, that sounds fucking horrible, doesn't it? But listen to the 23-minute blast from Philadelphia Noise Merchants, They're Gutting a Body of Water, and I think you'll really enjoy it and kind of see what I'm getting at. This short, sharp shock of a record, which is labelled S on streaming services rather than Lucky Styles, is precocious and playful. It delivers on the kind of atmospheres that you can only really get if you run a guitar through a shitload of distortion, delay, and reverb. In some ways, these guys aren't reinventing the wheel. On a track like Kmart Amen Break, you have these swirling verses going into this powerful, punchy chorus. You get that sort of feeling when you're tipping right over the roller coaster and your stomach flips. In other places, they mess around with how untethered their sound is. The electric organ psychedelia, which kind of wafts hazily alongside the washed out guitars on a track like Behind the Waterfall. Or the wonky groove of Lucky Styles that's eventually joined by this thrum of distorted chords. I just really enjoy everything that's on this record and I eagerly await whatever they do next. 19. Pine Grove with 1111. Those of you who have been watching for a long time will know that 2016's Cardinal by Pine Grove was one of the most listened to records of the last half decade for me. Absolutely love it. Up to this point, I hadn't really been enjoying much of the follow-up material from the New Jersey alt-country, folk-tinged Americana, however you want to label them. In 1111, it finally feels as if the band have hit their stride again, just like on Cardinal. They build on that resplendence that that record had, and they have that unbearable, almost unbearable earnestness that I think makes the band so endearing. Opening with the nearly 7-minute Habitat, the band immediately take you on a kind of a journey. It starts with this fairly rousing, jangly rock track and then becomes something much more sparse and reflective. Interestingly, it was developed from a B-side from the Cardinal era. It's a gorgeous track. Another standout is Respirate, which is this piano-led, almost ballad track with this languorous halftime beat. And the lead singer, Evan Stevens Hall, reflects on, you know, how COVID has impacted us all, and it adds a bit of a sting to the track because we can all remember how horrible that was for all of us and everyone around us. You know, it's only very recent history. Just adds an interesting tinge to this track. Sometimes being painfully earnest works in a band's favour. 1111 is an absolute reminder of that. Number 18, Chat Pile, God's Country. It's Oklahoma's sludge noise rock quartet, which fairly inexplicably ended up on a ton of end-of-year lists, and I'm kind of confused as to how they've managed to get in front of all these mainstream publications. I'm not complaining, I think it's great, but yeah, not something I expected. And it is deserved, because this record is 40 minutes of furious lamentations of how basically awful our society is. Just check out this quote from their Bandcamp page. There's a sick irony to how a country that extols rhetoric of individual freedom in the same gasp has no problem commodifying human life as if it were meat to feed the insatiable hunger of capitalism. So you know what you're getting from the off. And it's not a hidden theme in the music. The second track, Why, has lead singer Raygun Bush, which, yes, is a pseudonym, wearily screams out into the ether, wondering why people have to live outside when there are buildings all around the place where they could be. And there's this chug of thick distortion that leads the track into this killer halftime breakdown. Tropical Beaches Incorporated furiously tears into the perceived virtues of capitalism as the quartet throws down into this brutal drop C, drop B, maybe, riff. Guitarists that are watching this, do let me know which one it is. And Captain Ron, their drummer, is just pummeling everything in his wake. Wow. Number 17, Alex G, God Save the Animals. This one was a surprise to me. Alexander Yanuskoli has garnered a pretty feverish following in the past few years, and it's almost a cult-like status, really. You know, records like DSU, Beach Music, Rocket, 2019's House of Sugar. I've always admired the way the 29-year-old leaves very little to the imagination for his audience. It's all very open book, open-hearted. It feels as if he's been discovering himself as a musician whilst he releases records. And I really like that. God Save the Animals is, for me, the first time he's succeeded in crafting what feels like a complete and a cohesive body of work that guides the listener by the hand with its direct and clear instrumentation. Its pleasing jaunt through that jangly rock vibe of the track Runner to the heavy synth opener of Blessing. Meanwhile, a track like SDOS commands this haunting feeling with Alex's auto-tune vocals, minor piano refrain, not to forget that guiro that just won't quit. The quiet country guitar of Miracles is such a lovely track. It's a minor, quiet, but delicious moment on this record. And the fact that he can pair that kind of style with other styles on the record is nothing short of a miracle. To be able to do all of this and bring it all together into a cohesive body of work, so impressive. Number 16, Hachi, Giving the World Away. Pop and shoegaze. I'm in. Unfairly forgotten in the end of the year list wasteland, I think. Australia's Hachi, real name Harriet Pilbeam, released her second record in 2022, and it's a delight from beginning to end. First off, this album sounds huge. Sometimes if you listen with headphones or earphones to a record, and you know, that's primarily what I do with music, but you get that inescapable feeling that you should be listening to this music alongside thousands of other people in a kind of crush of a crowd. This album gives me that feeling in spades. She's described the album as being about finally finding one's footing, embracing visibility and moving past fear of the future to welcome its bigger decisions and higher stakes. Evoking that feeling of acceptance of who you are and the world you live in is there on that first track, Lights On. It's got a cracking chorus drenched in reverb as Pilbeam sings, I never felt so good with the lights on. Hachi's music, paired with George Elbrecht's production, is so well realised. The burst into the chorus of Quicksand, the slow burn outro of Till We Run Out of Air. In a more just world, this album would be a chart-topping revelation. 15. White Ward, False Light. Ukrainian black metal outfit White Ward's 2022 belter False Light is about as grandiose as it comes. A record fusing blood-curdling screams with the requisite chugging black metal riffs, but then you have these forlorn horn lines that sound more comfortable in a smoky jazz bar. You have passages of mournful post-rock and electronic textures. The quintet employed guest vocalists and horn players to construct this formidable piece of work, and everything sounds so passionate and sensitive, and that's really impressive considering the record is 1 hour 6 minutes long. I do think with this style, lesser bands would have made this feel a bit like a slog. But nothing here is a slog. Leviathan opens the record and it's 13 minutes long, and it graduates from what you might call a standard black metal refrain before this sax rears its head to reset your expectations. A mid-track break goes all ambient soundscapes on us with this guest horn part from Jerome Burns. He kind of takes the emotional baton from the rest of the band, and then we go into this wall of brutal metal theatrics. And that's the first track. You know, I really liked this record. I'd love for you guys to check this out, especially if you like heavy music. I haven't heard too many people talking about this record this year, so give it a go. Number 14, Raven Lanae, Hypnotize. An incredibly colourful and explorative debut record from Raven Lanae, this quickly became a regular go-to for me in 2022. Musically, it's not a simple sound to categorise. She takes R&B and she fuses that together with elements of soul, squelchy disco bass, afro beats, some really evocative vocal lines. It often feels as a listener like you're vacantly wading through your own semi-consciousness whilst listening, and the celestial vibes of the record are just washing over you. I say celestial because her music does have a through-line concept. Galaxies, the cosmos, they become metaphors for the spiritual curiosity of her mind, and it's a concept that really ties this brilliant record together. And her voice is to die for. This is one of the most magnetic vocal presences of 2022 and sells the vibe and tone of the record so well. On a track like MIA, her smooth, airy vocal delivery is very much the center point of this quietly beautiful world. If this is your kind of thing, you'll probably become obsessed, just like I did. 13, Conjurer, Pathos. It enrages me this record is not getting the attention that it deserves. I've heard a lot of chat about Cult of Luna landing this year with 2022's best metal record. I raise you Pathos. A pummeling, brutal assault with moments that deliver heft and genuine emotional weight. This second record by British band Conjurer is sensational. Not an easy sound to box into a particular metal subgenre. The rugby-based quartet leap around from kind of black metal freneticism to deep driving doom riffs, melodic post-metal interludes, and even more technical mathcore style sections. It amounts to 8 tracks of brilliance. The track I've not been able to stop listening to since I first heard this is Those Years Condemned, which sits right in the centre of the record. A hesitant, clean riff builds before this absolutely massive full band assault, with Brady Deeprose, who's the vocalist, bellowing his screamed vocal lines. Elsewhere, tracks like Rot play with ambient passages segueing into jagged, uneven breakdowns. It kept me surprised, engaged, and long after the first listen, I am still hooked. Number 12, Rosalia, Moto Mami. I've been obsessed with Rosalia ever since seeing her perform live at We Love Green Festival in Paris back in 2019. She played quite an early slot, which is almost inexplicable considering her crazy meteoric rise over the past few years. She really did put on a performance as well, like capital P performance. Capital everything, actually. Moto Mami is astonishing and kind of chaotic on a first listen. The Spanish artist sticks hyperpop, flamenco, dembo, reggaeton, experimental electronics next to a stick of dynamite and blows them all sky high. From track to track, it resets expectations of what the record is and what the record can be, and it defies any kind of boxing in, no matter how hard you try. The depth and range in different hands could end up feeling confused and messy, but Rosalia's chameleonic artistry means everything lands. Second track Candy is reggaeton with an electronic twist, with fractured vocal samples from the classic Burial track Archangel. A track like Hentai slips into a more conventional piano ballad sound, which just has a beautiful soul to it, but it's disrupted by aggressive bassy drum samples before the song's conclusion. And slow flamenco finale Sakura is like a spotlit stage finale, a crowd roaring at the end of the track before being abruptly cut off. Stellar stuff. 11, Denzel Curry, Melt My Eyes, See Your Future. My favourite hip-hop record of the year. Denzel Curry's latest is so densely packed with zonked out soundscapes, dexterous wordplay, and just little passages that get stuck in your head just after a couple of cursory listens. It's funny, we were just talking about Rosalia being an artist that is really difficult to define because she's so innovative, and I think, you know, Denzel Curry has very much been an innovator over the years. He's never allowed himself to be defined in a certain way as a hip-hop artist, as a musician, you know, and that's allowed him to grow and blossom into this incredible rapper, artist, and lyricist, and he's unlike anyone else out there at the moment. Now, I know traditionally a lot of people come to Denzel Curry for the bangers, but this record, it isn't really that, and I think that's one of its strengths personally. It's more reflective, it's more meditative, and that covers not just some of the more hazy instrumentals, but also the intimacy of the bars as well. Open and Melt Session number 1, which contains some brilliant jazz sounds from the legendary Robert Glasper. Denzel opens up on this track about his negative behaviour over the years, his hopes and fears, and the angst that he still carries with him. Second track, Walkin', has an absolute masterful mid-beat switch up, which goes to this halftime beat, and it grooves so hard along with those mellifluous vocal lines in the background. And penultimate song, Zatoichi, named after the legendary Japanese film character, has this really intense breakbeat chorus and a very hyperactive slow tie feature. But all the while, the reserved, considered style of the record never leaves. It's so good. 10. Katarina Barbieri, Spirit Exit. Italian electronic musician Katarina Barbieri has put out a rich, expansive record in Spirit Exit, and it's one for fans of the abstract, the fluid soundscapes that slip through your brain and take you to worlds that more conventionally structured music can't. Using a modular synthesizer as her primary compositional tool, the pieces here are dense webs of melody ping-ponging off of one another, always in motion, constantly working together, and whether that's a high peak or that snaking off into the reverb surrounding everything. Vocal samples are used to haunting effect on opening track At Your Gamut and second track Transfixed. You soon begin to realise that the original motif you were introduced to at the beginning of the record is weaved into the entire thing. It comes back in different guises, almost like apparitions of itself, it's half remembering what it is, but it can't quite. It gives the record an immense sense of being on a musical journey, and I know it's such a cliche to say it, but this is the kind of record that does that for you as a listener. The centre point of this record is the 10-minute Knot of Spirit, which is a gorgeous piece of compositional work that fans of synth music, ambient music, would really struggle not to love. No idea how I managed to do this, but I've only just noticed whilst editing this video that the fucking deep cuts lamp must have blown out halfway through recording. Didn't even notice when I was filming it, so that's great. Good bit of continuity there from me. 9. Ashen Spire, Hostile Architecture. I hoped to have this up my sleeve as a little left field pick to introduce to all of you, and then I hear Fantano steals my thunder and goes and gives it a 9. Cheers, mate. But in all seriousness, I'm very glad this record is getting noticed, because there's not very often a Scottish avant-garde, red and anarchist black metal band like Ashen Spire get the spotlight put on them, and this searing release deserves your attention. Red and anarchist black metal is how the band describe themselves on their Bandcamp page, and this is the treatise for the album. Hostile Architecture is a sonic exploration of the ways that subjects under late capitalism are constrained and set in motion via the various structures that uphold stratification and oppression in urban contexts. So, quite intense then. Interesting that this is the second record on my list that has a strong anti-capitalist bent to it and a kind of strong social politics. I don't have any other point to make on that other than that's quite interesting. The collision of Alistair Dunn's furious vocals with the absolute maelstrom that the band creates is an incredibly harsh and suffocating atmosphere as a record. And it really builds that idea of hopelessness against a system that will probably never change and never become more equitable for those of us that are enslaved by it. The 8-minute plus opener, The Law of Asbestos, builds to this absolutely killer conclusion as Dunn shouts, "Always 3 months to the gutter, never 3 months to the top." And James Johnson's flitting violin holds its own against crushing distortion and 16th note bass drum rhythms. One of the most engaging and furious records I've heard in a very long time. Outstanding. 8. The Weeknd, Dawn FM. I don't think this is a controversial point, but some may disagree. For me, this is the best project The Weeknd has ever put out. I've been listening to him since his trilogy of EPs dropped back in 2011, I think it is, and this feels to me like his most assured release. A complete package of ideas, a sonic clarity that delivers track to track without ever dropping the ball. Okay, I have one caveat. The whole "you're tuning into an FM radio transmission" thing is a little bit hackneyed, and we've heard it, a lot of times before. But I think it was sold off of the back of Jim Carrey's cliched, honeyed radio broadcast voice, and the fact that Abel was going for this entire concept of you are stuck in a traffic jam on the way to the afterlife. I think it works. Musically, the album just hits again and again with its 80s flecked disco pop. From a big chart hitter like Take My Breath Away to that moody groove on Is There Someone Else? Oh, and that track flowing into the incredibly emotive Starry Eyes is just so fucking good. 7. Sam Gendel, Blue Blue, a jazz record that anyone with an affinity for jazz should have listened to in 2022. Sam Gendel is a multi-instrumentalist from California. He's primarily a saxophonist. You may have unwittingly seen him perform in the past. He's performed with Moses Sumney. He's performed with Perfume Genius. He also once opened for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is pretty random. Blue Blue, though, is a 14-song suite of muted subtlety. It has a reserved grace that immediately softens me. It unwinds the tensions and stresses that I'm feeling from everyday life, even if that is just for 52 minutes. Composed mainly on guitar, the album was recorded in an isolated cabin in Oregon, and the simplistic picked melodies are joined with sax lines that pay little heed to form and are just thinking about flow. They're fluxing and they're gently twisting across the record. The brushed drums sound so organic and so kinetic. It almost feels as if you're playing brushed drums or you're standing next to someone who's playing the brushed drums. You can feel the dryness of them. On Parallel Diamonds and Crossed Chords, you can hear the dryness of the cymbals. They lightly sizzle, and that's the kind of the feeling that this record gives me. You kind of tune into the small, tiny, muted moments because it's quite sparse and it allows you the time to do that. It affords you the time to get to know the record like that. And there's no better compliment that I can give this record. 6. Little Simz, No Thank You. And this is why you don't release your Albums of the Year list in November. Simz is back with a follow-up to her 2021 record, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, with a record I think succeeds on almost every level more than that album did. I enjoyed Simbi, but I found there was something a little bit awkward and maybe self-conscious about some of the music on there. Some of the orchestral flourishes didn't quite work for me. I thought the voiceover was just a bit cheesy and didn't really fit with the incredible musicianship that Simz always displays. No Thank You takes some of that orchestral instrumentation and it leans into it a little bit more than the previous record, and it pairs that with a no-nonsense, solid bars approach. You know, Simz is out here front and center, it's all about her, and that really sells the record. It feels like the best melding of Sometimes I Might Be Introvert and Grey Area, which was one of my favourite records of 2019. Gorilla has a bombastic big band break between Simz delivering these really braggadocious bars, and the collaboration with producer Inflow is really obvious here. You know, these two clearly work together incredibly well. X has an emotive build across its 6-minute runtime. Climbing strings and soulful backing vocals give even more to these lines that are self-reflective about her journey and the kind of societal wrongs that she sees. Zero skips, I love this record. 5. Jockstrap, I Love You Jennifer B. London duo Jockstrap were already shaping up to be something impressive with the release of that 2020 EP Wicked City, but now they're signed to Rough Trade and they have released this exhilarating debut record that's impossible not to fall for. Their press release talks about all the usual cliches of modern pop alchemy and that kind of thing, and I would bash that, but to be honest, that is a pretty good way of describing this endlessly exciting LP. Taylor Skye and Georgia Ellery both studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in the UK, and that fact is difficult to shake when listening to how individually crafted every single song feels on I Love You Jennifer B. Neon starts things off gently with strummed guitar chords and Georgia crooning, but then there's this pervasive digital distortion that comes into the track, and then it builds to a finale that's pretty emotive. It goes from one thing to the other in a really interesting way. Concrete Water is a sweet, romantic little thing until the fizzing energy of the duo just kind of boils over, and we get this really great wonky groove that comes out of nowhere. And Glasgow, a coming-of-age song, according to Taylor, with these swooning string arrangements and a stripped-back acoustic guitar that backs Georgia's vocals about love lost. I dare you not to like this. 4. Show Me the Body, Trouble in the Water. I didn't honestly think a hardcore record would make my top 4 in 2022 because it's not a scene that's particularly given me much of what I've liked over the past few years. I've kind of fallen out of love with that style of music in some ways. But New York Troublemakers' Show Me the Body's furious new record is an absolute winner. I really don't think I've been this excited by a band that's kind of hardcore or hardcore adjacent since I first heard The Armed back in 2018. I mean, this trio remind me of the first time I heard Fugazi. And I'm not saying that in terms of style, in terms of musical style, but just in terms of the raw energy and the self-assuredness that comes through the music. For a record that starts with cautious banjo strumming, you know, you might be lulled into a false sense of security, but when loose talk finally starts to kick in, you realise what you've let yourself in for. Food from the Plate has this screeching harmonic puncturing the halftime riff, guitar and bass, fuzzier than a neckbeard. Out of Place is a change up in tone and proves the band that can do it. It has these nervous pads and frontman Julian Cashwan Pratt sing talking. It's got a bubbling energy to it when you know that the track is going to go somewhere, you know the record is going to take you to more brutal places after. It creates an interesting energy. And the brilliant penultimate track, World War IV, which really reminds me of Refuse's The Apollo Program Was a Hoax. I don't know why, every time I hear World War IV, I think of that track. But it's a signal that the band doesn't have to be heavy and hard all the time to make a considerable impact. Like, what an interesting band and what a fantastic record. You really should go and listen to this. 3. A Bong Jr, Some Nights I Dream of Doors. Now, I banged on a lot about this Nigerian-born, London-raised artist when he released his EP Which Way Forward. It was great, but what about his debut record? Sparkling, confident, precise. The way he takes influences of Afrobeats, electronic and soul has resulted in this gem of a record, and it has this strange quality that it makes you feel close to the artist the more you become familiar with the music. I don't know if I can describe that in a better way. It's not a great way of describing it, but I just feel quite close to a Bong Jr as an artist because I now know this record so well and love this record so much. The first thing to say is that, as with his previous material, OB's vocal presence is really the focal point of the record. It's very commanding vocal presence. You immediately recognize it, and that's so much about its quality. But it's quite malleable. He's able to do a lot of things with his voice. Now, whether he's turning the grit up on a track like Message in a Hammer, or the immediate follow-up to that called Parasite, which is earthy, smoky in quality, but also has this politically charged lyricism. The title track, Sometimes I Dream of Doors, is a widescreen declaration of how capable he is of creating this hushed atmosphere and really pulling attention in. I can just imagine a crowd full of people just silently watching and hanging off his every word on this track. It's there on a track like New Man as well, which is like the musical equivalent of a new dawn with the sun rising up. You know, it really peps you up when you listen to it. It certainly does for me. One of the most fascinating voices I've heard in the past half decade. I love this artist and I love this record so much. 2. Daniel Avery, Ultra Truth. Daniel Avery has created his greatest work in Ultra Truth, and it's an album with an incredible amount of warmth which defies the icy beats and fathomless scapes he crafts across these 15 tracks. Ultra Truth is the culmination of an artist able to expertly balance contrasting styles and influences. As much as within this record contains those fluxing electronic scapes that are more likely to be found on a experimental record, a slightly more experimental record, he never loses the emotional focal point of the track and is always tethering it. Everything here feels tethered, nothing feels like it's kind of wayward and kind of floating off, like Katarina Barbieri's record, for example. 2 very different electronic records. I'm not saying one is a better way than the other because they're both fantastic, but it's interesting to think about how he uses those fluxing sonic soundscapes in a completely different way. It's there in the spongy bass of Spider, which may as well have just come out of the 90s Warp roster. The pummeling drum breaks on Devotion, coupled with these digital swirls, create something truly transcendental. Elsewhere, the doleful, high-pitched melody on Collapsing Sky would perfectly soundtrack the end of a bittersweet film. But if you need one track to convince you to listen to this record, it's Chaos Energy, featuring the one and only Kelly Lee Owens. From the retro house beats to the synth strings which swell to this grandiose moment. Cinematic, impassioned, and a word I haven't yet used in this video, ethereal. 1. Black Country, New Road, ants from up there. I'm going to start by saying that this record prompted me to buy the first CD I think I've bought in about 12 years. So you know I like it if I've spent money on plastic, which I don't even have a CD player to play on. Made even more poignant somehow by the prompt exit of singer Isaac Wood, this heartfelt and inventive record is basically the perfect follow-up to their 2021 record For the First Time. It's a collection of tracks I made an emotional connection with quicker than almost everything else on this list. It really did cut to the core of me on a first listen. Baroque pop stylings, the jazz inflections, and the witty wordplay from the now departed Wood all contribute to this almost painfully earnest record. It's like that from start to finish. It's very earnest, and I think as a listener you either buy that style or it makes your toes curl. I mean, obviously I'm in the former camp, given that this is the #1 record of the year for me. It's there in the track Concord, which builds to this gorgeous crescendo in the final minute. The beauty of the horn and string lines in Snow Globes. I mean, what a track Snow Globes is. It accompanies this astounding free jazz drum kit solo from Charlie Wayne and Wood's increasingly fraying vocals. Honestly, I don't know how I can adequately explain how much I love the closing track Basketball Shoes. This is a 12-minute song which over the course of that time goes from quiet contemplation to a masterful build that bursts with energy multiple times, keeping you second guessing as a listener until finally it just burns out, just like the record. It's unrivaled. To me, it's outstanding, and it's the Deep Cuts album of the year 2022. Thank you so much for watching the first Deep Cuts video I've done in 2022, and funnily enough will be the last as well. Hoping to be back next year with a couple more videos if the day job allows me to. Let me know in the comment section what sort of stuff you would like to see. I'd love to do a guide, I'd love to do some more genre guides as well. Maybe some think pieces and stuff, but just let me know what you think. But it's been a pleasure. I look forward to chatting with you all in the comments section. Have a great holiday season, have a happy new year, and I'll see you on the other side.